Sorry about that, folks. National Audubon Society. We are a nonprofit bird conservation organization, and since 1905, we have been protecting birds in the places that they need today and tomorrow throughout the Americas using science, advocacy, education, and on-the-ground conservation. Audubon state programs, the 41 nature centers, dozens of sanctuaries, hundreds of chapter organizations and partners have an unparalleled wingspan that reaches millions of people each year to inform, inspire, and unite diverse communities in conservation action. And we have this vision where the world in which people and wildlife thrive, and Audubon has been doing this for over 120 years now, and the Montezuma Audubon Center has existed for now 16 years. Very proud of that. Audubon has this hemispheric approach to bird conservation. Audubon's new strategies in Latin America, the Caribbean, Canada, and of course throughout the United States represent a new chapter in the evolution of Audubon, in which we broaden our focus to protecting birds in the places that they need over their entire life cycle. Back in the early 1900s, Audubon was protecting small parcels of land that was available in the eastern United States primarily. As our organization grew, we expanded out across the lower 48 states. Now, with our science backing us and understanding of birds and conservation needed for birds and migration, we understand that we have to have this hemispheric approach to conservation, where we're protecting, yes, breeding grounds in the US and Canada, but also critically important stopover habitats across the United States and Central and South America, and also the wintering grounds for these birds. Many of our songbirds, like the warblers, vireos, flycatchers, ruby-throated hummingbird, and many, many others, go down to Central America, the Caribbean, and sometimes even South America for the winter months. So very important to conserve habitats. This is very ambitious, but we are being told by birds that we need to make this change and have hemispheric approach. Now, a little bit briefly about Montezuma and this Montezuma Wetlands Complex. We are about an hour's drive from Rochester, another hour drive from Syracuse, and about an hour drive just north of Ithaca. We are located right here at the north end of Cayuga Lake, the longest of our Finger Lakes. And the Montezuma Wetlands Complex is much, much more than what you may see driving on the thruway. It actually incorporates the National Wildlife Refuge, as well as many acres of New York State Department of Environmental Conservation lands and waters up in the northern half of Montezuma. This area is critically important for migratory waterfowl. There are 36 species of ducks, geese, and swans that stop at Montezuma, both spring and fall migration. We're also the home to the very first bald eagle restoration program that took place back in the 1970s. This is a bird's eye view of Montezuma. Gives you a really nice view of the critically important habitats that we are protecting and restoring: forests, wetlands, grasslands, the waterways, and there is agriculture within the Montezuma Wetlands Complex as well. Montezuma is a huge area. It's 50,000 acres. To put that into context, that is twice the size of Rochester, New York, and 4 times the size of Syracuse. Most of the publicly owned land is owned by the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service. That's the Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge. That is this shade of green that I'm circling with my cursor here. Just to orient you, the thruway runs right through here. Is this red line, Seneca Falls being right here, and the north end of Cayuga Lake is right here. So most of the public land, about 10,000 acres of Montezuma, is at the National Wildlife Refuge down here. Another 9,000 acres is, again, your land as taxpayers in this country. This is owned and managed by the New York State Department of Environmental Conservation. And it's all this shade of green right in here, the northern half of Montezuma. The Audubon Center, where I'm center director, is right here. So we're about 15 minutes north of the National Wildlife Refuge. Easy drive out 104, 31, the thruway. If you're coming out from Rochester or from Syracuse, the thruway and 31 are great ways to reach, and 5 and 20, great ways to get out to see us right here. A lot of opportunities for you to explore Montezuma. 30 miles of hiking trails on all this public land, about 8 canoe and kayak boat launch locations, another couple of motorboat locations as well, and various habitat restoration projects, educational programs, youth leadership activities, tours of Montezuma, all take place at Montezuma Audubon Center right here in Savannah, New York. Now, let's get into plants for birds here and why is it so critically important that we have native plants for birds. Birds are telling us that they need help. And since 1970, we have lost nearly 3 billion, that's with a B, birds. And for the first time, researchers have estimated this loss of bird species in the Western Hemisphere. And it's not just threatened species that are declining. Many of our backyard favorites are also losing ground. So almost anywhere you go, you can find birds, of course. They scurry through waves on the beach. They sing as they wing over the prairies. They raise chicks and nests in forest habitats, and they visit backyards and balconies and community parks and urban parks. But while birds remain everywhere, people are actually seeing fewer birds than 50 years ago, according to this study. It's not one single factor that can account for this loss. Habitat loss is likely the most important driver in some of the biomes, but it can't explain the widespread declines on its own. Multiple complex environmental factors, including pesticide use, insect declines, and climate change, as well as direct threats like outdoor cats and glass skyscrapers, are also hitting birds from a range of angles. And for migratory species, long journeys and changes to wintering habitats could pose additional challenges. So the study itself doesn't look at the causes, but the results point to how humans' influence over the last 50 years has chipped away at bird populations. Another recent study from National Audubon Society points to climate change. And as the climate changes, so will the places that birds need. Audubon scientists actually took advantage of 140 million different birding observations recorded by birders and scientists to describe where over 600 different North American bird species live today, which we call their range. And then they use the latest climate models to project how each species range will shift as the climate changes and how human impacts advance across the continent. And the results are clear. Birds will be forced to relocate to find more favorable homes. We're seeing birds already moving northward earlier in the spring. They're having to go further northward to breeding grounds to get at that equitable climate, that equitable temperature that they have evolved to thrive in. And that's a big time challenge and pretty frightening to think. An example, the bobolink, which is a grassland bird species about the size of a robin, black and yellow in color, a very melodious call. That is a species in severe decline. And like I said, it inhabits grassland areas. So thriving with native grasses, native wildflowers. We do have sizable amount of that type of habitat at Montezuma, which is why we have some breeding bobolinks. However, looking at climate models, the bobolink's range is going to shift up into the central portion of Canada. And right now, that part of Canada is boreal forest. So what is going to happen to bobolink? Either they adapt to living in forested ecosystems, or they may suffer and they may not survive. So we need to do a lot more. Our governments need to do better, and we as citizens need to do better to lower carbon emissions in order to reduce the worst impacts of climate change. And Audubon is at the forefront. We are working at state legislators as well as at the national level to reduce emissions across this country. Now, taking a closer look at urbanization and how people have built up this lower 48 United States over the last 70 or so years. Every year, billions of birds migrate north in the spring, and then they go south in the fall, and the majority of them are flying at night. However, when they're flying at night, they might encounter scenes like this, where it's nothing but lights in urban areas and even suburban areas. And as we expand out our urban areas into these rural and ex-urban areas, it's even more challenging for birds because they can become disoriented by these bright artificial lights and sky glow that can cause them to collide with buildings or windows or even the ground. This is making life more challenging for birds as we expand out. So I'm going to go through a series now of images to show you how housing density has changed across this country here since 1940. Dark green on this map, like what you see right now back out in the western central plains, as well as out in the western half of this country, that is low housing units, very few houses out there. As you get into more of the yellow areas, that's a little bit increased housing, and then the most dense housing that we're going to see on this map are going to be indicated in orange and red. So you can see New York State right in here. You see I'm hovering right over Buffalo. There's Rochester, Syracuse, and then out towards Albany, and then down here, of course, New York City, Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. Okay, so I'm going to get through these slides here, and I just want you to see how housing density has changed. And then we're going to talk about what this means for birds. All right, so getting now forward, going forward a decade into 1950, so decade by decade, relatively still consolidated urban areas, but post-World War II, we can see that in 1960, we've spilled out now into the surrounding landscape. There's more yellow, more red and orange on the map. Watch how not only east in New York State in particular starts to glow, but watch the West Coast as well. So 1970, mowing down more and more essential habitat, destroying more habitat for birds. 1980, converting millions more acres into built up areas. 1990 into more housing developments. Look at how, basically from Boston all the way down to Washington, D.C., just one solid urban area. Look at upstate New York, again, the West. And urban sprawl continues as we get into 2000. In 2010, you can see now within this, this past decade we just came out of, the eastern half of our country has seen tremendous increase in housing densities, and sporadically in the West, in the Central Plains. You can see Denver, you can see Phoenix and Arizona area, and Los Angeles, the Valley, San Francisco, and the Pacific Northwest all starting. And so this is all changing bird habitat. Projecting now just a few years more down the road, it's only going to get worse. Right? This is less than 10 years from now. We've already lost a staggering 150 million acres of ecologically productive land to urban sprawl. 43% has been developed into some type of suburban or urban matrix, and another 52% converted into agricultural fields. Well, what does this look like on the ground? What does this mean for birds? We've got neighborhoods, and many of these neighborhoods, we have sterile lawns. Lawns are not good habitat for birds. 40 million acres of lawns across this country now as a result of urban sprawl. Some of the housing areas and people will plant exotic or invasive plant species that do not benefit birds, that do not provide seeds, natural seeds, berries, and they do not attract the native insects that some of these birds need in order to survive. Some people will use pesticides on their lawn to control insects, and they also use herbicides as well to control weeds that can have a negative impact on birds. There are walls of glass, so there's more bird collisions going on right now. Cats and I love pets. I own a dog. Family owns a dog, and we love pets. But cats can kill billions of birds every year, which is devastating. So when we think about birds and what they are going to need, yes, we have to think about plants themselves and the benefits that they're going to provide. But we also have to think about what is attracted to those plants, in particular the insects. So this is a cool image of a prothonotary warbler that nests out in the Montezuma wetlands complex. There's some that nest on the north shore of Oneida Lake as well. We're pretty much at the northernmost extent of their breeding range here in central New York in the Finger Lakes region. And they love to eat insects. And so they're here at Montezuma, they're over in Oneida Lake because of the great number of native trees that support the insects and the caterpillars in particular that prothonotary warbler is going to feed to its young. Now, I want to, before I get into the plant, the details of the plants, and show you some examples of the plants that you might be able to plant in your yard or put on your balcony, I want to stop sharing my screen for a moment and switch over to the Audubon Plants for Birds database. This is a very valuable tool. It's free for everybody to use and very accessible. I'm going to show you how to get there, and then you can play around with it. But I'm going to give you a little tutorial here today to help guide you through this Plants for Birds database. All right, so I'm going to quickly do that, and then I'm going to get over. Let's see if I can do this. Where is it here? I think it might be here. All right. Hopefully, Kelly, can you see my screen? I'm showing Plants for Birds. Just type. Okay, she says yes. Okay, great. So I hope everyone can see this right here. So to get there to this Plants for Birds database, it's just audubon.org/plants for birds. One more time, audubon.org/plants for birds. And once you're there, you just scroll down right here and you can find native plants for your area. You type in your zip code right here. 346. That's the zip code for the Audubon Center up in Savannah. And then it loads results for you. Tells you your closest Audubon facility, in this case, Montezuma Audubon Center in Savannah. Right, and then you can search for the type of plants that you want. If you are interested in trees, you can select just trees. If you want trees and specifically evergreens, there's that option there. If you're not interested in that, you want shrubs, you want lower growing vegetation, go ahead and select that. If you want annuals, perennials, grasses, those are all options for you to select. Okay, so I'm just going to go with trees to start and to simplify things. Right, you can even really get down into the details here and say, I want to search for trees that are going to provide for butterflies. They're going to provide seeds. Are going to provide fruit or nuts. Yeah, let's go ahead and search for nuts. And then you can even like say, okay, I want to see a particular bird. I want to try to attract and encourage more birds of a particular species or suite of species to come to my yard by planting X tree, right? So you can search for that as well. And you could see it was updating as I was selecting all this. So, here's your list, and it's alphabetical. So it'll give you, here's American elm. It'll give you a nice photo. You can zoom in. You can see the foliage. If there might be images of the flowers on these trees or the berries that are produced. You can get a sense for that. You can get a detailed description about that tree species, some of the attributes, and some of the birds that may be attracted to that tree. And so in this case, the American elm, you've got quite a variety of native birds that are going to be attracted to that, including the thrushes, like wood thrush. American robin is a thrush as well. You see the orioles, your wood warblers like yellow warbler and maybe cerulean warbler will be attracted potentially to American elm. All right. So you can see it's a list as I'm scrolling down here. So here's a great example. American witch hazel, cool plant, actually flowers in the fall, really interesting. After the leaves drop, the flowers are still on. So that's pretty cool. Good looking. Small tree, big shrub. We've got it at the Audubon Center. I really enjoy that one. You see all the different bird species that might come to the witch hazel. So again, Plants for Birds, audubon.org/plants for birds. Great online resource for you. Okay. Check that out. All right. So I'm going to stop sharing this and then get back to the presentation. There, let's see. Here it is. Okay. All right, so we checked out that. There we go. Okay, so speaking of trees, some of you might be interested in it's not full screen. Okay. Let's, oh. Shows my notes. Ah, okay. Well, that's inconvenient. All right, let's try. Mhm. What's that? I see. Apologize, folks. Okay, how's that? The technology. All right, there we go. Thank you. Sorry about that. Just gonna scroll. And we're gonna get to the plants now. And I will say that the plants that I'm going to focus in on here, I've got them in my yard, or we've got them at the Audubon Center, and they're really great species to plant for pollinators of all kinds. You know, so birds in particular, yes, but butterflies and moths, bats, potentially even. So getting back to this, so if you're interested in trees in particular, again, so the trees are going to, yes, produce flowers that are going to attract insects. In particular, they're going to be attracting species of insects that produce a sizable number of caterpillars that are going to be devoured by birds. And so what are the best caterpillar trees? If you want to bring in birds, you got to bring in caterpillars. Look to the oaks: white oak, red oak, chestnut oak, pin oak, all will do well here in the broader Finger Lakes region, upstate New York. Okay, that's really the best. They're medium pace growing. They're not going to be really fast growing, but they're going to grow at a medium rate. They're going to be sizable trees for the most part, 60, 80, 100 feet high. So make sure you've got enough room for that species. Eventually, you put in a tree now, and 20, 30 years down the road, you're going to have a sizable tree providing a lot of shade for you. That's going to make it tolerable for you to be outside in the summertime, get out of the sun a little bit, and you're also benefiting birds. Willow, cherry, birch are also other great caterpillar trees. Consider those trees. I know crabapple, I've got one in my front yard. Boy, the birds just love to eat those berries come late fall. And it's also a nesting tree. I've got mourning doves that will typically nest in there starting as early as March. But certainly by April, May, they're in there. Maples, pine, hickories, other very good trees for you. All right, so now let's get into more of like shrubs and also some wildflowers. Okay, so first, winterberry. The winterberry holly is another name. So this is a shrub that we have at the Audubon Center. We've got both male and female varieties, and so you've got these reddish orange berries that typically will stay on the shrub as long as the birds don't eat them all. And when you've got that snowfall, we haven't had much of that this winter, but you got the snowfall combined with that red orange berry. It looks really, really nice. Adds some nice color to your landscape. You can keep it pruned, so it doesn't grow higher than your window, so you can still see outside and enjoy the birds and your landscaping. The pruning doesn't harm it. We recommend that you prune in kind of the late fall time frame. Let the shrub get the flowers, get the berries, and if you do want to prune, go ahead that late fall time frame. Right, so this does well in moist soil, and we've got it in pretty much full sun. It would dry out a little bit if it was in a drier or sandier soil, but a great shrub to have for eastern bluebird and many other of our year-round residents. Also at the Audubon Center, right at our entranceway, on both sides of the entrance, we've got a service berry bush. Again, you can prune this. It could grow 25 feet if you allowed it to, but we keep it about 6 to 8 feet high. Gets really nice, dense, thick foliage as a result of that pruning process. And then flowers typically in May to June, and then by like July, we've got these nice big red berries on it. Cedar waxwings do love it. We've also had Baltimore Orioles in there grabbing those berries. And it is in a partial sun. It's more of we've got it in a morning sun situation. So we've got it on the east facing side of our building, and does really well there, thriving, and really looks good. Nice entranceway to the Audubon Center. Some favorites from my home, one being bee balm or monarda, and flowers. These long red tubular flowers are going to be blooming from late spring right on through the summer months. And I've got it growing right in with, let's see, what do I have? Oh, I've got the buttonbush shrub in there. Does well in full sun. I've got it under a tree, so it's getting more partial sun, but it's out in the open of the yard. Moist soil does pretty well. I wouldn't do it, put it in any dry soil, but moist soil, and then at least partial sun, and you're going to attract butterflies. You're probably going to get ruby-throated hummingbirds in there as well. Going for the nectar, of course. I planted this in my yard here just recently because I saw how well it was doing out in the Audubon Center's grassland, where it's mostly sandy soil, dry soil. And I've got this one part of my lawn, it's full sun, but I've got this, I added some soil there, and it's kind of elevated compared to the rest of the lawn. So it drains very well, mostly dried out. And from May right on, again, through the summer, ruby-throated hummingbirds will come, and monarch butterflies are also attracted to this with the orange color. So full sun for sure. Definitely get this out there. It's in the milkweed family. So the butterfly weed will produce milkweed-like pods. They're narrower though than the common milkweed, but they still get those pods, and inside those pods are those parachutes that will distribute the seeds as the wind blows. So by late summer, it's more like early fall, mid-fall, those pods will burst open with the drier conditions after growing throughout most of the summer, and then the wind carries those seeds, disperses the seed away. Be fun to see what has come back to my yard this year. The viburnums, quite a few different viburnums to choose from, 8 different varieties, that could do well around here. You've got arrowwood, maple leaf, just to name a couple. Generally, white berries come springtime, or excuse me, white flowers come springtime. And then the berries is dark blue, almost purple color, are very good for our native birds. Consider this if you've got some moister soils, and you're looking for a shrub that you can maintain, or you could let it grow to 10, 15 feet high if you wanted, or if you wanted just to manicure it, keep it at 6 foot, no problem. Another one from my yard, and I was first introduced to this out in Syracuse. This is the cardinal flower. We lived near a park in Syracuse area at the time, and I was noticing this beautiful red tubular flower come midsummer, and it was in this really moist area, really dark in there. So partial sun to almost full shade or dappled sunlight anyway is where this is going to thrive. Again, it's going to attract the ruby-throated hummingbirds going after the nectar in here, and throughout the summer months you'll have these beautiful red blooms. We've got a couple of these small trees, big shrubs, depending on how you want to think of it, and beautiful white flowers of the flowering dogwood tree. So again, attracting insects, early insects here, getting the songbirds fed as they're coming back in from during migration, or our year-round residents are trying to beef up their reserves and get energy in order to breed and raise their family in the coming year. Don't forget about the berries that are going to come out, darker purple berries, generally speaking. And they do well in part sun or even full shade. I used to live down in Virginia, and we had a couple of these trees underneath large oaks and tulip poplars. So it was dappled sun at best, and it did very, very well, really thrived. Yeah, there we go. Oh yeah, high bush blueberry. So again, like a small tree or large shrub species here. White, pinkish colored flowers come springtime as you get into the summer. Blueberries, yes, good for birds, but hey, guess what? Blueberries, yeah, edible, as long as you're not allergic. Edible berries for people as well. Really moist soils is where this is going to do best, and full sun is going to be best for this as well. I put Black-Eyed Susan in here. It's one that I really enjoy. We've got it growing in the grassland at the Audubon Center. I put it in selectively in a couple of spots at home, and I paired this up with purple coneflower. I love that contrast between the yellow and the deep purple. It blooms kind of a midsummer right on through to like October, that early fall season. American goldfinches, other year-round residents will eat the seeds that are produced by Black-Eyed Susan, as well as that purple coneflower plant. So full sun best, might do okay, and part sun does well in a variety of soils, but seems like moist to common garden soil is going to work out best here. Another one from the Audubon Center, the black chokeberry. This is definitely a shrub species, doesn't grow very tall. We keep this pruned down so it's 3-4 feet high at most. Nice white flowers come spring, nice burst of color coming right in the spring, and then after pollination you get these really large dark purple berries that I actually kind of enjoy. I do enjoy eating them every once in a while. I know the birds do as well. There aren't too many left come at the end of the fall season. But so yeah, so if you enjoy the taste of it, you can make jams, jellies out of the black choke berry plant. Yeah, full sun for sure. It's on the south side of our building. Generally, it's moderate moisture conditions, nothing too wet, nothing too dry, not sandy soils, but average conditions of the soil will be very good. This plant will be very happy in that. So, whether you've got just a small piece of property, you've got a balcony, there is something that we all can do, something that we all can plant for birds. They're going to make birds' lives easier and better, and it's also going to beautify our world, make our lives more enjoyable as well. You can really go big. You can go small, you can go medium. If you've got acres of land to work with, boy, you can really go all out. There's just a variety of things that we can do. So some other things to consider. In addition to plants, yes, plants are important, but I also want to address some other things that you can do in your yards, on your balconies, in your communities to make them more bird friendly. One of those being water. When water is critically important, and especially during normal winter weather, this winter we're having, it's certainly nothing like that. But under normal winter weather, when we're frozen over and got snow on the ground most of the winter, liquid water is in short supply. And so having liquid water out in your landscape or on your balcony is going to attract, our year-round residents or the Canadian birds that come down and spend the winter with us. But you combine liquid water, maybe with a couple of feeders, black ghost sunflower seed in one, maybe thistle, sock, or Niger seed in that sock. And you're probably going to have a very busy yard, a very birdy yard throughout the winter months. Don't forget to clean. If you do liquid water, even the wintertime, make sure you clean that water and that container regularly. We generally recommend a 10% bleach solution. Soapy water would do just fine as well. Don't want to spread disease. Something I like to preach and actually practice is not doing much in the yard in the fall, leaving the leaves be, leaving the brush piles be, or if you do pick up branches from the yard, from the lawn, you do have lawn, piling them up and making a debris pile, a pile where you've got opportunities for birds to seek shelter, get out of the wind, get out of snow and cold, and find nesting habitat. So these brush piles are a great way to attract species like wrens, house wren, woodpeckers might be in there. Other year-round residents may take up shelter. Feeders, I referenced feeders before. We generally recommend two types of seeds, straight up black ghost sunflower and straight up a thistle seed or a Niger seed. Some of the mixes don't provide the food, the nutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the carbohydrates, the protein, the fat that birds need in order to make it through migration, to make it through winter or the breeding time. So that's why we recommend and we put out just the straight up seed. You can also, this time of year, put up suet cakes. During this some warmer time of year, we generally don't do that. The suet can get rancid and we don't want to, again, spread disease or make the bird sick. But winter, great time to put out that, and you might get the red-bellied woodpecker going over to the suet cake feeder. So some other ways that you can conserve birds and their habitats, outside of putting out plants or doing some changes in your landscaping. Do you vote? How do you vote? Who do you vote for? Our legislators who we put into office, they have impacts on birds and the places that they need. They can enact a legislation that might help birds, that might not help birds. So keep that in mind come November or next time you have the opportunity to vote. Do you watch your energy use? Again, climate change is here. We know the climate is changing, and we need to do all we can to reduce emissions, reduce our energy use. And that is going to make birds' lives and our lives more enjoyable and easier. Local products, buying local products, going to your local CountryMax store, hopefully not too far away from you, and buying products from them, hopefully made in the USA. Again, transportation of goods all over this country now, that all takes fossil fuels for the most part and is increasing emissions. So the more local you can buy, the better, less emissions you're going to produce. Are you an Audubon member? Are you a member of another conservation organization? Do you support National Audubon Society or another conservation organization? You go to audubon.org, find out more information about becoming a member of our organization. And when you become a member, you can get information about great programs that we offer and opportunities to get involved in bird conservation work at Montezuma and really throughout upstate New York. There are community science projects that you can participate in. A Christmas bird count just happened, back in December and early January. Now that we're into February, Great Backyard Bird Count is going to be coming up here in the next week or so. There are so many others that you can participate in, like bald eagle surveys that we do at Montezuma. So counting birds and documenting birds, fun, enjoyable, but it's also so important. It guides Audubon's conservation work. It tells us where birds are, where do we need to do more conservation work, and where are we doing enough, where population's high enough. Again, I mentioned voting earlier, but staying connected with your local representatives and talking with them about your interests and your passion for birds and conservation, and encouraging them to vote on certain legislation. And when you become a member, we can help you craft that message, and you can have those conversations with your representative with our help, if you'd like. No pressure. So I'm going to start to wrap it up here. I do want to save time for questions. And so as the sun sets on our time together this evening, I want to thank Kelly once again and CountryMax for giving me the opportunity to talk about Audubon's Plants for Birds program. It was certainly my privilege to introduce you to National Audubon Society, what we do at Montezuma Audubon Center. Again, Audubon's Plants for Birds database, a great tool to get even more information. There are just hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of species of native plants that are adapted to upstate New York here that could potentially do well in your yard, going to make your yard more beautiful, enjoyable for you, and also going to benefit birds. So check that out, and I hope you enjoyed the time that we shared together today, learning about Plants for Birds. If you would like more information about National Audubon Society, we've got many ways for you to get in touch with me. There's my email address or phone number. The Montezuma Audubon Center website is right here, where you can find out about volunteer opportunities and becoming a member of the center, and as well as our programs that we have coming up. And then if you're more in the Central New York or Syracuse communities, want information about the Onondaga Lake Conservation Corps program, here is the website for that part of our organization. So I thank you, and why don't we go into the Q&A? Oh, that's right. I have to unmute.
All right, thank you so much, Chris. That was fantastic, very informative, and some really eye-opening stuff in there as well. Just go to the questions. We have a couple here. The first question is the planting what is the Planting for Birds program? Can you explain a little bit more about that?
Oh, yeah. So broadly, Plants for Birds is, it's the plants that people can put into their yards, in their communities, that are going to benefit birds. So we just call it generally Plants for Birds program. And again, you go to that database there, you type in your zip code, don't have to type in your email address. You can if you want, but you type in your zip code, you'll get the list of plant species that are adapted to your environment. They're going to do well there. Everything from the trees to the shrubs, wildflowers, and native grasses that will do well there. And then they're going to benefit the birds as well. And you'll also find as you explore that website, didn't have time tonight to go through all of that, but you'll see there's information, additional information about making your yard, your balcony more bird friendly. I introduced you to some of those components here this evening after I showed you the plants, but there's great information, articles in there that'll be very helpful for you.
Great, thank you. The second question is, any suggestions for shaded or wooded areas?
Well, yeah, I guess it really depends on trees or shrubs or wildflowers. But I'm just thinking here. So in terms of wildflowers, that cardinal flower, if the person asking the question was interested in wildflowers, I would say cardinal flower is one of those that really will do well in full sun or dappled sunlight. There's a great variety of other wildflowers. I'm thinking now back to our forest at the Audubon Center, where mayapple, trillium does well, another wildflower. These are May and June bloomers. Trout lily will do well in that full sun. I mentioned mayapple. There's also another smaller wildflower called a mayflower. Nice white flowers on that one. Let's see here. Yeah, and then in terms of shrubs, you've got, the spice bush is a nice one. I mentioned the button bush earlier. That's another nice shade-loving shrub. Another thing I didn't mention is keeping invasive species out, making sure bush honeysuckle, common buckthorn don't get a foothold on your forested ecosystem. And if you see it early, if you see an invasive species early, best to remove it as soon as you can, prevent it from spreading. When it spreads, gets a foothold, it's very challenging to remove. Yeah, so hopefully that answers some of the questions there for a forested or shaded environment.
Great. And then somebody asked, what was the second kind of seed that you recommended?
So there's the two seeds we put out at the Audubon Center. We highly recommend, if you have to just choose one, black all sunflower seed is a great all-around seed. So many of our native year-round residents will come to black oil sunflower seed feeders. Black-capped chickadees, tufted titmice, white-breasted nuthatch, woodpeckers, cardinal will all come. The other seed I mentioned, thistle, sometimes it's referred to as Niger. There are specific tube feeders and sock feeders good for thistle or Niger seed.
Great. Any suggestions for keeping deer away from the plants?
Yes, the ongoing battle we all wage, right? That's a tricky one. And I found that since we got a dog during the pandemic, we see a lot fewer deer in our yard. So dogs will help keep the deer away. I have also found that, I will cage some of my seedlings, is some small trees that I plant or shrubs, until they get to a certain age, and then their bark is thick enough that the deer um, don't seem to like it. You can also search online. I don't think we've got it on our Plants for Birds database, but if you search for deer resistant plants, you might find some that do better than others. If they're hungry enough, they're going to eat anything, unfortunately, and that is a battle, constant battle, unfortunately. I have gotten some spray, some deer off and rabbit off, that seems to have worked for keeping the deer away, seems to keep the rabbits away from some of my trees that I've just planted.
Somebody wants to know if you took the photo of the woodpecker behind you.
Oh, what's that? There it is. No, but that was given to me. That is a photograph. My in-laws gave it to me, and I believe that was Mendon Ponds Park over in Mendon, outside of Rochester. Pileated woodpecker, adult, feeding the two chicks. Yeah. No, I'm I'm no photographer. I am a bird nerd, but not a good photographer.
Next question. What do you do? How do you discourage invasive caterpillars that actually kill the trees?
Oh, whew. That's right. I know there's the moth that's going through portions of Rochester right now, and killing some of the oak trees. And I know from some people that I know who have dealt with that, they had to hire a contractor to come in and spray. And then that doesn't work for everybody, and I'm not condoning it, not saying it's good or bad, but I know that, if you have an infestation and it is a specimen tree, so maybe it's your one big tree, or it's just a gorgeous tree, and you want to do all you can to protect it, and you've got resources to do that, there are contractors out there that can help you deal with invasive insects that might be killing your tree. I think if we had more birds, we'd have a lot fewer insects. I know Montezuma, yes, we have mosquitoes, but we have a lot fewer mosquitoes than we would if we didn't have 300 different species of birds out at Montezuma.
Some activists in terms of pollinator systems suggest concentrating your efforts on a single species of pollinator. Would you recommend something similar for birds?
Say that one more time, Kelly.
Some activists in terms of pollinator systems suggest concentrating your efforts on a single species of pollinator. Would you recommend something similar for birds?
So I'm just trying to understand fully the question. I'm not sure
So I'm
understand exactly.
They're asking, would you recommend concentrating your efforts on a single species of pollinator?
Like a single plant, just putting in one type of plant?
Yeah, I believe so.
Well, variety is the spice of life. And when we have a variety of plant species in our communities, that is going to benefit the most birds. So when you've got forests and you've got some understory, maybe some shrubs, and you've got some native wildflowers and grasses, if you can do this, that's going to benefit the birds most. We run into problems, and we're seeing this now, say, for example, with emerald ash borer. right? If, fortunately, emerald ash borer isn't 100% of our forest. It's a sizable amount of our forest, but it's not the whole forest. If it was, we wouldn't have forest anymore, because emerald ash borer is killing all the ash trees across New York, the mid-Atlantic states. It's moving out to the Midwest, probably going up throughout the Northeast too. So when you have a variety of trees and shrubs and wildflowers, then yes, there might be some insects that come in and might kill off some plants, but then others are going to thrive, or hopefully take in up that void that was left by that dead or that vacant position in the ecosystem. So variety is key, and it's going to be best for our ecosystem and best for the birds.
All right, they did send a clarification. For best results, should we as home gardeners focus our resources on supporting one specific type of bird with our plant choices rather than just birds in general?
Okay. I see. So there, if we're talking, okay, so I'm gonna guess that there might be like an urban or a suburban community where, okay, we've got a finite amount of acreage to deal with here. So if you can, again, plant multiple species of plants to attract multiple bird species, that's best. Species that are doing okay, the ones that are year-round residents here, cardinals and eastern bluebirds are thriving once again after being decimated throughout most of the 1800s and 1900s. They're thriving once again. They can utilize people's backyards, bird boxes, nesting boxes, things like that. So year-round residents for us here in New York are doing okay. The ones that are most challenged right now are the ones that need like large scale conservation work, right? So I'm thinking of, okay, species like bobolink, for example. Grassland habitats generally not a common habitat in our ecosystem anymore. Grasslands are very easy to convert into built human areas, either housing units or businesses or roads, what have you, parking lots. So or if left unmanaged, it will quickly revert to shrubland habitat and then eventually forest habitat, benefiting some birds, but not bobolink, right? So if we, so there's some species that are in severe decline, and however, I will say that our year-round residents, even though they are fairly common still, we need to make sure they remain common. And so whatever you can do by planting native vegetation in your yard through our Plants for Birds database, getting some information, more information about plants for birds in your community, do that. If there are things you encourage, you put out liquid water for birds, keep them around, brush piles, giving them some shelter in the wintertime and potentially nesting habitat, cats indoors, things like that. That's going to keep our common birds common. And that's important as well.
All right, I think 3 more questions.
Yep.
Is milkweed good for birds?
Yeah, milkweed. So common milkweed is one found in grassland habitats. It can get into native garden beds as well. We've got it at the Audubon Center. I got it a bit in my yard. It can get a little aggressive. So I don't want my whole garden to be common milkweed. I do like it, so I've got it confined to one area. I do enjoy seeing the monarchs come to it. I've even seen caterpillars on the leaves. And so the flowers of common milkweed will attract insects that potentially get eaten by our songbirds. That's good. the common milkweed also is going to benefit butterflies, moth species, and butterflies like the monarch, which still needs a lot of help. So I would definitely recommend planting common milkweed.
Great. Any plants that can replace lawns? What about ground covers?
Yeah. Every spring I try to take out another chunk of my lawn, and I've been enjoying watching the transformation and seeing wildflowers and the shrubs kind of taking up spots where I had lawn, making my life easier, less to mow, less to rake up. Excuse me. So ground cover. I have, there is, let's see, it's a ground phlox, creeping phlox that seems to spread nicely and comes in pink, and I've seen purple flowers. So creeping phlox, keep that in mind. There's a native petunia. It's like a whitish pinkish flower. It also likes to spread out. That's doing well in my yard. Thinking other native ground cover. There's a native pachysandra. That's a little hard to find, but that would do well. Don't get the non-native pachysandra. There's a non-native pachysandra. You don't want that one. So get the native if you can find it. Let's think. Yeah, and the phlox, I really enjoy the phlox. That creeping phlox, a nice low growing, beautiful color, full sun, does really well.
All right, and then our last question. She says, "Thank you very much for your presentation. I haven't been out to Savannah in a while, but looking forward to a visit soon." She is asking about the Audubon Center's hours.
Oh, thanks. And look forward to seeing you. We are open Tuesday through Saturday, 10 to 4. And the 200 acres and 2 miles of trails that we sit on are open daily from sunrise to sunset. Now, keep in mind also, we are not the Montezuma National Wildlife Refuge. Their visitor center is closed during the winter months. We are a year-round facility at the Audubon Center. So the Refuge Visitor Center will reopen around April 1st. And also the Wildlife Drive at the National Wildlife Refuge, which is accessible from routes 5 and 20 in Seneca Falls, will also open April 1st. So if you're looking for birding excursions, opportunities to explore Montezuma on your own or with us through a tour, check out Audubon, the Audubon Center's website, which is montezuma.audubon.org, right there.
Great. Well, thank you everyone for coming, and Chris, thank you again for such a fantastic presentation. We really appreciate you taking the time to come and share your knowledge.
Thank you, Kelly. My pleasure. Thank you all. Hope to see you soon.